Another thing about like scaling that I feel like gets never mentioned so much is like whenever people talk about scaling, they always think, does this team beat this team in a team fight in 3 items, in 4 items? Like who wins? But there's like so many factors that go into it. What if one team has a blitzcrank? Then the team fighting thing doesn't matter. If they get a pick and it becomes a 4v5, like the scaling does not matter. What if one team has a stronger split pusher than the other team? Like if they can constantly
That's
force
probably
what
the
they
most
want.
missed one, Loco. Probably the most misunderstood one is you can have all the scaling you want, mate. If I have the strongest single champion in the game in the late game, I will win the game if I split push correctly. Like it doesn't matter at that point. Like that's probably the area that fans are missed the most because the other team might have all the champs that look like, wow, that comp. Imagine the fight. It's like there's never going to be a fight. I know people from NA are still just like, but why wouldn't there be? Wouldn't we all just meet in the middle and then that's where the fight would take? It's like, no, you can actually go to these things on the side. And as long as you get back before two people come and kill you, you sound. So now Hooney's like, two people, right? I'll write that by now. It's when two people come, leave the side lane. Yeah, okay.
Our vocab is really important because when we talk about it as scaling, then it almost just goes straight into team fight and like who wins later, where the actual word should be like who has a better shot to win at mid game, who has a better shot to win at late game. I'm sure someone can like pick out a better word for it, but just the word scaling has so much connotation with team fight. Like people immediately think team fight, and so do the casters, and fans also have to think of it that way too.
Yeah, I actually think it's an even more widespread problem is just our terminology is so ludicrously vague in League of Legends. Like mid or like early mid late game might have like meant something in season 3 or season 4 when like games were like much longer. But now the games are ending at 30 minutes. Like what does mid game actually mean? You know, like a lot of people have different definitions. And I think that like defining those points, defining scaling and different types of scaling, whether it's like side lane or team fight, is a really important thing that's just not happening.
I can tell you the real issue there goes like this. Like you're absolutely right, because it's one of the things that I've actually made a focus of my career, admittedly more in CSGO, etc. games I'm like more familiar with. I've been around the whole time, you know, because I saw actually, believe it or not, you guys in MOBA games were ahead of us in CS. We didn't even, this is not a joke, have a term for people who were basically supportive players in Counter-Strike. We used to just say they were just a player. And then as a result, the reason why this was very, very prominent in the discussions was fans would just always make Counter-Strike teams that were just the 5 best scorers, basically. Like it'd be the equivalent of making a football team with 11 strikers. They were just doing that. And their logic was like, well, he's the best player, so put him on. So the reason why, this is the reason I brought this example up, like sometimes people complain that in the modern day NBA, for example, or the NFL is not a bad example as well, like some of the position names don't make as much sense for how the player plays now. Like, for example, if you want to look at like Aaron Donald in the NFL, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, the position he plays. Like the influence he has on the game is 10 times what that role was designed to have, right? But that's because he's an exceptional player. Now, the point is, that doesn't mean we should get rid of the term, because this is the point I was going to make. What they always say about the roles in these games is the reason why they still use the same term is because the role was actually created just to explain very quickly to a layman the difference between players, like I'm saying. So hence why, for example, you have simple terminology like support and carry, which itself gets confusing, because then what if you have like a carry but who plays in a supportive fashion? Or what if you have a support player who might be the best player in the whole league, like Hylissang? He plays like a carry sometimes in some ways. So, it gets confusing. But the thing is, you're right. On the one hand, we need to like update the terminology if we can. The problem is, and this is the real issue, is it's really hard to make it actually get widespread in the community, though. So the real issue is, like, absolutely, and I agree with you, like that. I hope people do articles where, for example, like you say, in season 2, early, mid, and late, it's all you needed. That described the game perfectly. In the modern day, where unless something goes really wrong for both teams, there's not going to be a 50-minute game between two top teams in League of Legends. So as a result, the late game now in League of Legends, for normal context, should probably be 30 to 40 minutes in the game. That's probably the late game at this point. So I think personally, we probably just need different terminology. Like instead of 3 sets of terminology, we probably need 5, right? Like, for example, even saying early game doesn't make much sense anymore. Like some of the shit Fnatic did with level 1s is very different from how Origin's really good early game was. Like, that was the way they set up the map. Fnatic's was like they would actually get kills on you at level. Like they did some amazing shit. So I agree with you. The problem is, like, if your terminology is very limited and very weak, it changes how much you can actually discuss this stuff. Because, like, if you just say early and I say early, who knows what the fuck we actually mean by that, right? I
Yeah,
agree
so
though.
it's-
There's a lot of upgrading we need for that.
There's
stuff.
like three Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, the biggest example for me was at the start of Summer Split. Me, Vedius, and Frost all sort of realized we were using the same words, but we meant slightly different things by them. So we actually got in a room and started like hammering through, like, what do you think these words mean? And we talked about like priority.
I saw one that was very interesting. This was in an interview the other day? I'm trying to think who did it though, where they said, and maybe it was Medic. Someone said that you no longer use the word tempo and broadcast unless it's Medic, and he specifically means one thing, right? Because you're right, that term. Like, listen, anyone who's watched my talk shows, go back 2 years to 2017, and every show is people like tempo, tempo, tempo. He had tempo. He came out the base with tempo. He didn't use the tempo. It's like, and you're right. To me, who doesn't know the game too well, I used to actually know less about the game from hearing them say that than if they'd just explained the situation to me.
Exactly. It's like, it's such like, and I know it comes from like chess and that stuff, and it's like a real word to those people.
Sure.
But in League of Legends, I'm convinced it's a fake word, because I hear people say that like this team has tempo, which means like it's their turn to be like playing on the offense. But I also hear they have a high tempo jungler. Wait a second. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
a high tempo.
exactly.
How can you have a high tempo jungler if it's just like a map state thing?
That's a Mike Young thing. That's a Mike Young thing.
Yeah, no, I know, but like people like genuinely use it. Like it actually like blows my mind. And like every analyst I talk to has like a slightly different variation of the word tempo. So we, as a Colorcaster team, literally just decided we're not going to say the word tempo anymore. We're just actually going to explain what we mean. Because also outside of like a very small fraction of our viewers that understand like what tempo generally means, no one actually knows what we are talking about when we say tempo. So we say, oh, this team can move first to this objective, or it's their turn to like be on the offensive and look for a play or put down vision and all this stuff. And we actually think it just like makes our analysis like so much more clear now.
One of the problems as well with that is like there's two parts to it there. One, you're absolutely right. One issue is all the experts know what the word means, but it means something slightly different to them.
Yep.
And then they use it differently. So actually it becomes more confusing even when the experts are talking. But then the other problem for me is any of these terms which already had a very strong English meaning. You gave a great one there, tempo. Well, the problem is what they mean by high tempo jungler is he just ganks a lot. He has a lot of action, a lot of spit. Well, the problem is if you're using the word tempo elsewhere in the next sentence, it means something totally different. Because as you say, most people use tempo to mean like, right, well, at this point in time, we have a window where we can be the ones who make a play at this point, you know, some shit like that. Same with priority. If you say this lane has priority, right, if someone knows that that means that actually they're the ones that can move first when they roam out of after farming up, that's very different from the word priority. Priority just sounds like before the game, we just decided ourselves we're going to make this lane our priority. Like that would actually totally skew how you thought of what you were seeing on the screen. So I agree. That's like a really tough area because as I say, the real problem with it is all you can do as someone who's like a thinker in the space is have these conversations. If you're someone who's like Kelsey, write an article, hopefully, maybe it gets to some people. But unfortunately, the part where you have the great conversation and then something happens in between and then all of a sudden everyone uses that term, that part's the part that's really hard. Like no one really knows what's supposed to be done in that part. It could be an article, it could be a show. Sometimes it's just coincidental. People just pick up a term and you never know when something's going to get popular.
Duncan, can we start closing out?
Because I definitely think, by the way, because I definitely think like early mid late's probably the most egregious example. Because, dude, in an old school game, terrible. 30 minutes was the mid game. Like to me, mid game starts at about. I mean, it's not really a time thing, literally, but you know, you think roughly of how most games go. 25 to 30 minutes was the mid game. That was where a lot of it was taking place. But in the modern day, the mid game is probably like 15 to 20 minutes. Is way earlier in the game.
Yeah, so
and it's probably just dictated based on your items, right?
I'll let you know how I sort of think about it because I think it's a little bit different. I don't think we're not talking about the time of the game. We're talking about the actual game state. So for me, there's not like early, mid, late anymore. If you want to talk about scaling, it's all about itemization and like champion scaling in their kit. And in that case, you can talk about like, you want to hit like 3 items on an 80 carry or something like that, as opposed to, I want to get this 80 carry to the late game. You know, like I think that's how you describe that. But for me, you have like the laning phase, which is when you have like top jungle, mid lane, 2 people in bottom lane. And then like once
the Herald phase. Down,
you start, you have Herald phase, or I call it like rotation phase as soon as bot lane like leaves and actual lane assignments break down. And then you sort of have like this lull state. But when you're just trying to like kill all the outer towers, basically, and there's no like major objectives to play for, and then you have Baron phase.
Yeah,
and once you have Baron phase, then you have end game. End game is once like with one team fight win, the game ends, right? And it has nothing to do with time on the game. It's just literally the game state. And I think it's a much more like like I don't want to say it's a much more fluid way to describe the game because it's not based on timing at all. It's literally just what is being played and not trying to like box teams into be like, you're a late game team. It's like, no, this team is like actually has like a weak rotation phase. Let's say for Splice, you know, they're not very good at like knocking down those towers, and, like accelerating the game, or they can't like execute in a Baron phase early on. They have to wait till much later. And that's why their games go so late. And we never have to like describe teams as like very like binary, but like 1, 2, 3. You know, you have 3 options of a team that you can play in. That's like super narrow.
I think
Sure.
those
By the
three
way,
events are the
just so everyone's
huge ones.
clear, when he says lol state, he means the English word lol, like there's a lull in the action, nothing happening. He doesn't mean a lol state, like when Team Liquid played G2 in that MSI final. It was like, oh, they're fucking styling, like there wasn't that, you know. Just so everyone's clear.
I agree.
What you say,
100%.
Loco?
I agree 100% with Ender. Like the
What do you say,
new
Loco?
new early game is the beginning of the game until first turret falls or Herald, because after that happens, like the game changes completely. People stop laning, like people are just moving around the map trying to get into winning matchups, trying to get mid control, and then like mid game goes all the way until a team gets Baron. Once a team gets Baron, like that team has full control, or once a team has full control of Baron, like that team has a hold on the game, and once that Baron gets down, like the game starts ending really, really quickly. So I think those are like the 3 distinct phases. Like early game is like up to Herald and turret, and then there's mid game all the way up until Baron, and then after Baron it's just late game.